So it's 12:01, so I can officially say good afternoon. Welcome to this Remote Work Wednesday webinar, our first in the series of these sessions about the future of remote work. My name is Ron Wilson. I am project coordinator for the Remote Online Initiative. This session is being recorded for your information, and I know we'll have more folks joining us. But I wanted to say a word before we get to our speaker on our first Remote Work Wednesday session. I do want to thank our sponsors and our partners. Specifically, I'm with the Huck Boyd Institute for Rural Development at Kansas State University and coordinator of the Remote Online Initiatives. You know that ROI is return on investment, right? Well, we're investing in remote work and the potential for remote work and the opportunities that it can bring the citizens of the state of Kansas. Our partner in this project, our partners, my teammates include Deborah Cole, who is the state program leader coordinator for K-State Research and Extension Community Vitality Team, and Deb Carlson Oldie, who is strategic advisor for the North Central Regional Planning Commission in North Central Kansas. I do want to give a little bit of quick background about the Remote Online Initiative. From a rural development standpoint, the K-State Research and Extension Community Vitality staff identified that remote work, the work from home initiative, was an emerging part of the rural economy, and identified that Utah State University Extension was actually beginning to offer classes that would certify an individual, online classes from which through which an individual could earn certification as a remote worker or a remote work team leader. And so, and then we found that the Hansen Foundation in Northwest Kansas was doing some really excellent pioneering work to support rural and remote classes in Northwest Kansas. After conversation with those folks, and we said, do you intend to expand? And they said, no, our plate is full. Then K-State Research and Extension started to pursue the opportunity to expand this kind of remote work training and certification elsewhere in Kansas. And I have to tell this story. So I took the remote online certification class in January of 2020 just to see what it was about. 6 weeks later, the economy shut down. I had absolutely no choice but to work remotely. And I was thankful for the class and have come to love remote work. We've been through the pandemic, times are changing, but the remote online initiative classes are still available, 1 month online classes for people to become certified as a remote work professional or a remote work supervisor or team leader. At the same time, if you go to the next slide, Deborah, along came an opportunity to work with the North Central Regional Planning Commission. And big thanks to our sponsor, Network Kansas. Specifically, we received a Network Community Solutions grant from the Network Project for Change. And the North Central Regional Planning Commission successfully applied for a grant in partnership with us to fund scholarships for people to take these remote work certification classes in targeted counties of Northwest Kansas, those not served by the Hansen Foundation, actually. And so today's first in the series of Remote Work Wednesdays is really supported by this grant from Network Kansas. So very grateful to them and grateful to the North Central Regional Planning Commission, who's been a wonderful partner in this. What is the purpose of Remote Work Wednesdays? In a sentence, it's to learn and share about the opportunities and challenges of remote work. We think remote work will continue to be a significant part of our economy, but what are the opportunities? What are the challenges? What's the potential? What are the pitfalls of working remotely? What does it mean to the economy of Kansas? And what can it mean to the citizens of our state? And so we're beginning this series on Remote Work Wednesdays. And for the next, this month and the next 3 months, we'll be having a Zoom session such as this, with a thought leader, an individual who can speak to remote work on the first Wednesday of each month during the noon hour. So it's a lunch and learn format, informal, but we want you to come, learn, share as we think about the future of remote work. And so we're kicking off this series. Those are the dates to be watching for the next 3 months as we move into 2024. Our speaker today is indeed one of those thought leaders in the telecommunications industry. Jim Jamison is president of AT&T Kansas. He directs AT&T's government affairs, public policy, and philanthropic programs. Jim comes to Kansas from AT&T's corporate external affairs team, where he directed the corporation's involvement in external associations with public officials, also managed a number of major corporate and policy campaigns. Previously, Jim had served as a director with Austin-based Public Strategies, a public affairs firm serving major corporate clients, and worked with members of the Texas legislature. Jim serves on the board, of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce and the Board of Jobs for America's Graduates Kansas. So he's intimately involved in thinking about career opportunities for the people of our state, and a member, congratulations, Jim, of the 2023 class of Leadership Kansas. Jim and his wife, Denise, have 2 daughters. He's an avid bicyclist, and he is today president of AT&T Kansas. So Jim, please share your perspective on remote work.
Well, thank you, Ron. I really appreciate you inviting me to do this. We've had a couple of conversations, and I know you and I share a lot of the same thoughts on what remote work can look like, what it should look like, what some of the issues that need to be addressed are. So look forward to the conversation. You mentioned me serving on the board of the Kansas Chamber, and I know the Chamber is aware of the work you're doing, and I hope they have an opportunity to support you as well. So just a tiny bit about me. I moved to Kansas about 1.5 years ago after a lifetime in Texas, and they told me that Kansas is a basketball state, so I could still root for my beloved Texas Aggies during football season, so long as I did the right thing during basketball season. And here we are with 2 Kansas teams in the top 25, so my loyalties are a bit torn. But that's great. What an exciting time. So you said, Ron, that I could spend a couple of minutes talking about broadband, which of course is near and dear to AT&T's heart. You mentioned the pandemic. So 3 things happened when the pandemic struck. We ran out of toilet paper. We ran out of any type of cleaning product. And I think every telecom exec in the nation went home and prayed that the telecom network would hold up under just vastly different usage patterns. You know, the nation's telecom network was built to have people working 8 to 5 in urban cores, going home in the evenings, and much less traffic in neighborhoods. But the pandemic struck. You know, the first week or so, everybody sort of thought we had a week vacation. But after that, everybody fired up their computers, and we all sort of held our breath to see if the network would hold up. I'm super proud to say that is a great success story. AT&T is not alone. Verizon, T-Mobile, all the other carriers, Cox, networks held up beautifully. That's at the network level. Now, what happened at the individual level is a bunch of people realized, oh, well, I can't be on this slow internet package anymore. I can't be on a throttled or limited wireless package anymore. I need to think about how I'm connecting to the network. Families learned that they can't have just one computer at home. The student may need to do homework, dad needed to get on the computer, mom needed to do her work. All of a sudden, just the devices in homes, people had to look at that. So it's been a bit of a ride. We were pleased to be able to be a part of getting some of the devices out, primarily to students, but it continues to be something that all providers are looking at today. Like I said, the network held up beautifully, but it has provided some opportunities for additional investment. AT&T is incredibly proud over. They won't let me give you a single year figure, but since 2018, AT&T has invested over $1 billion in our network in Kansas. So Certainly that's relevant to folks across the state who are trying to figure out, well, how can I connect from a rural area and have these opportunities for remote work. You can't do a remote job without being able to check voicemail, without being able to get on a Zoom like this. All the things that internet connectivity allow. Nationally, the Federal Stimulus Act recognized that's an ongoing challenge. There's currently $450 million on the table at the state level here in Kansas for all providers to figure out, okay, where does the digital divide still exist, and where does the state need to continue to pour resources into letting providers build broadband networks, primarily fiber, in areas across the state. So we're really looking at that. Remote work, it's the new normal. It may be, we may go to sort of a hybrid environment where some people are coming into the office some portion of the time, but clearly some significant element of people's time is going to be spent working remotely. If I were a young person trying to build a career today, I'd really be torn. How do you show an employer that you're serious about working? That work from home is not just, hey, I don't have to go to the office, I don't have to put on structured clothing. So what are the ways you're going to set yourself apart? And I really think folks who've had the foresight to participate in this program, what a great opportunity you're providing them. And I think it's just a great opportunity for somebody to set themselves apart. As a supervisor, we know there's a couple of different types of employees. You call. I had a couple of folks reporting to me. I'd call one of them, and they never seemed to answer their phone immediately. They never seemed to respond to email immediately. I know they were doing good work, but were they sitting at were they prepared to work kind of 8 to 5 normal business hours? And I know there needs to be some flexibility in that. We've really seen that work-life balance is critical, but there's that sort of employee, and then there's the other employee that they always seem to be close to their phone. When you texted or emailed, they were available quickly, and so employees are going to make themselves sort of known as being kind of, are you ready to work when you're supposed to be at a little more at probably a slightly a darker level. I know there are companies that are starting to spend their time, they're monitoring keystrokes, they're checking to see how long a employee is logged into the network. They're checking to see, how often is that computer active. I don't think that my company is doing that sort of thing, but I've certainly signed, notices that my activity is subject to monitoring, and I think, I'm ready to stand accountable for the time I put into the office, and I think people ought to be thinking about that. Thinking through, what does the future look like? I think we're still figuring that out. At least AT&T. AT&T recently notified a bunch of employees, a bunch of management employees, that for some time they're going to have to come back to the office. We don't know exactly what that looks like. Certainly there's folks whose job is out in the field, whose job is being out on customer locations, or being I spend a lot of time in the Kansas State Capitol. I can't do that work sitting in an office, but for some workers, some of that time needs to be spent in an office environment. What our CEO says is that we are great at executing remotely. Once we've got a product, we've got systems, we've got procedures, we can do that from our homes, from our home offices. But there's really nothing in ways that replaces what we used to call water cooler conversations. The sort of conversation. When I was working in our Dallas headquarters office. I could sort of pass by a senior officer's office and walk in and say, hey, how did you approach this problem? I know you've been here before, or, what are you working on? What are the sort of synergies we might be able to find together? Those sorts of conversations are incredibly hard to replicate remotely. You can text, and we've got Microsoft Teams that has a chat function. We've got all these other tools, but I don't think most people really use those as a way to sort of just have casual, ongoing conversations in the same way that you could do when you're just passing somebody in the hall. So I think we're still thinking through that. The other thing, as I've counseled folks who are much younger in their career, how do you build your own brand? How do you take control of your own destiny? And I think what is critical for some people is that folks be really deliberate in how they build relationships, primarily with both colleagues at their own level and with the folks above them who are, sort of controlling who gets to move into more advanced positions. Somebody used the term, you have to be CEO of your own career. I think that's a really great way of thinking about it. As you think about, who are the folks you want to reach out to, who are doing the sort of work that you want to move into. I think you've got to be really deliberate in thinking through, who do you reach out to and when, and how do you foster those sort of relationships that used to be a lot more easy to do on a daily basis. So, Ron, I think probably that's enough from me, and I'm happy to respond to any questions you've got specifically, or any of the participants. I'm not entirely sure how we're taking questions in this format, but happy to respond to anything you've got.
Well, thanks, Jim. I greatly appreciate it. We'll throw the floor open to questions. You can enter questions in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute and pose a question, that would be fine. Clearly, Jim, the relationships are so fundamental to really all of human life. But in our careers, how did you do it? How did you network? Was there a practice you followed, or some tips you might suggest to anyone as they seek to advance in their careers?
I think originally I focused mostly on folks who were in the sort of positions I wanted to be in. They had clearly a body of knowledge that I wanted to see how I could tap into. I think a little bit later it became who kind of had a worldview or a working style that seemed more natural to mine. I know for a long time I was trying to emulate. I was trying to be somebody I wasn't. I had a boss who wanted me to be large and in charge. I'm a natural introvert. So, I was trying to be somebody that just didn't come natural to me. So later in life, I sort of purposely sought out folks who maybe were a little quieter, a little more, studious, maybe, that maybe not be the right term, but, a little more kind of sat in the back of the room and watch things going on. So, how can I bring my authentic self into a workplace and still be successful? And that proved really valuable to me to kind of talk to folks. And how do you build a relationship, with some big, important state leader when, frankly, you'd rather hide in the back of the room and just watch everybody?
Yeah, not every quarterback can be Patrick Mahomes.
Exactly.
So we've got to find our own style. A colleague of mine talks about social capital, and in community vitality, we talk about the community capitals, because there are there are forms of what we call capital in all different ways. In addition to the obvious financial capital, political capital, social capital, there's natural capital and the built capital and so forth in our communities. and it's appropriate to call them capitals because there are things we can invest in and things we can nurture and grow. And so how do you build that social capital in a remote setting or a hybrid setting? Is there some intentional way? I mean, you mentioned chat functions, but are businesses trying to, in the hybrid setting, maybe going to a weekly, a weekly Zoom as in the form of a staff meeting, or retreats where people distant as well as on site can convene? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts. I don't know that I've got a lot of answers. I think I was going to let you keep asking the question, see if you stumbled into the answer, because I think a lot of folks are struggling with that. I'm thinking about a specific elected official that's sort of important to what I'm trying to accomplish, and how have I built that relationship? I mean, again, you can't text them on a constant basis, just every time random thoughts come to you. So I've tried to be real intentional and real deliberate about, noting, his birthday. His birthday was coming up. So, the opportunities where it was a little more natural for me to reach out and just say hi. I've tried to, note opportunities where he was out in the community and sort of congratulated him on a public acknowledgement or something like that. So, again, it sort of, what is the natural cadence in an electronic world? And I don't know that anybody's really got the answer to
that. What I am hearing from you is some intentionality.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not just random. If a person has a goal, they need to have some specific plans to advance.
Yeah, I think if there's not some intentionality to it, at least for me, it's too easy for me to get involved in a bunch of other things that day-to-day life brings to me. I get busy doing other things, and I look up and a couple of months have passed and I haven't reached out to somebody, and that relationship is not as fresh or as vibrant as I want it to be.
And Deborah makes a point in the chat, if there are others on this call that have some strategies, some suggestions, some tips that might have worked well for them, we'd be glad to hear from you. And she notes our January speaker is we hope going to specifically address this topic, how to work, develop some strategies for networking in the process of working remote. I do want to ask Jim about the search for talent. Our businesses across Kansas have trouble. We need people, and we need talented people, and if we're really going to succeed, that talent search is important. For some, I believe the remote work has opened up the potential for a person in a given community or a business to access talent that they might not otherwise find locally. In the talent search, is that a dimension that can create opportunities for employers as well as individuals?
It absolutely is. And, you mentioned being a part of Leadership Kansas. That was probably the single most recurring theme through Leadership Kansas, is just the need for every employer. Every employer is struggling. Where do I find talent? And, knowing the programs like this exist is huge, because, throughout the Leadership Kansas program, it was, who is doing this sort of training? Who's doing, for whatever employee type I need, whether it's, in the construction trades or it's in, remote professionals, whatever it is, where can I go to find those sorts of workers? Probably relevant that as AT&T tries to build a broadband network across the state, we've had to go to companies like Cisco, our suppliers, and say, help you understand this product, help us get a body of potential workers trained. But I think across the state, to provide some opportunities for anybody who's interested in reskilling or growing or potentially investigating new avenues. There's just an enormous amount of opportunity out there right now, and at the moment, I think that employees are well positioned. Sometimes there's a jobs environment where employers have kind of a little bit the upper hand. Right now, I think employees are really in the driver's seat.
Well, there's plenty of need. And I think there's some frustration on part of
Absolutely.
businesses, getting people who are reliable and consistent and dependable is a starting place. I know one thing I valued in the remote work class that I took was a project tracking management, some of the tools that they shared with us that you can share with a supervisor, and a supervisor can track what's happening as well as the individual. I thought that was very helpful from an employer standpoint. Deb Oldie has shared some comments in the chat. Deb, I don't know if you're in a position to unmute and speak to this, but she was talking about building connections with others in as you seek to advance. And she mentioned LinkedIn as a tool. Certainly, that's a more common tool. She says, especially to reach out to someone new with a specific request, stay connected to your network that you've established through the years. Also key is follow-up and providing value to that connection, understanding their goals. And once you understand that, then find ways to work with them in ways that will be meaningful. Deb has been working remotely in North Central Kansas for many years, actually. And I think this is consistent with what she's saying. Once some of that social capital is established, and maybe that's face-to-face or otherwise, then it works. The process of working virtually or remotely can be better as you go forward, once you've established a baseline of some relationship, some social capital.
I think that's such an incredibly insightful comment. I struggle with that. And if I can sort of grossly lump LinkedIn and a bunch of the other social media tools, how you build a presence and how you sort of position yourself, in a public space like that is something I still work through. Again, it goes back to that bringing your authentic self. And I think LinkedIn specifically is not quite as natural to me as maybe some of the other social media sites. But then you have to really be thoughtful about how much you're sharing. You want to maintain some level of professionalism, but those are generally personal spaces. So I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what the right position is there. But yeah, it's a great tool.
I think all of us are in that situation trying to figure this out as we go. Jenny makes the comment, not all of your connections have to be work connections. She refers to the multiple co-working spaces across Kansas, and we have seen an increase of those. I think there's maybe 3 in Manhattan now, and so we have seen an increase in the number of co-working spaces, which provides you some support. You still may be working remotely, but you can have an office space for a meeting. You can have, there might be others there that you can network with, and
that's another great thought. I think that as I travel the state of Kansas, I can't have an office in every community, so I've used some of those sorts of spaces, and I think the world's a lot more comfortable taking a meeting at the local Starbucks than they ever used to be. So when you sit down, have a cup of coffee, plug in with some free Wi-Fi, and I've met a number of elected officials at the local Starbucks.
Absolutely, very true. And Jenny's posted a Facebook site that shows the Kansas co-working sites. Francis Graves says, we have a few remote professionals who find value staying connected locally in person to professional groups too, making time to participate with young professionals groups and so forth. So all those other networks are really valuable and important. You mentioned, I think, Jim, at least in previous conversation, companies saying it's time to come back. come back to the office, and you did touch on it today, at least in a hybrid setting, what are you hearing? Are you hearing that from others in the corporate world, for
We
example?
are. I just read a Wall Street Journal article about a bunch of companies that are trying to figure out how that looks. So specifically for AT&T, we just, again, we noted that some of the things we want to do, executing on existing plans is easy to do remotely. Innovating is less easy to do. But a number of employees have said, look, I got used to a remote environment. That's what works for me in my life situation. I don't want to come back to a daily 9 to 5 in an office, or I'm unable to. So a lot of folks, it's not going to be a situation where employers say you're going to come back to the office and that's how life's going to be. The Wall Street Journal article I just read was sort of fun. It was talking about, okay, well, what are the sorts of things that we can do to compel people to bring, make it valuable to them. There was one company is going to offer free subscriptions to Rent the Runway, so you can have a free wardrobe for folks who got used to working a little more casually. Where there was a farm to table sort of thing where you go into the company break room and find fresh produce that you can take home that night. So again, I think right now employees have a lot of power in sort of controlling what that conversation looks like. It's not going to be a one-sided mandate from on high from the C-suite.
Well, and I think in one of our earlier conversations, you made the point that to get people, we're probably going to have to be flexible to a certain level. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think it's the flexibility that people really have valued about remote work or work from home.
Absolutely. We used to refer to AT&T as one of the blue chip companies, and there was a day where it was an 8 to 5, and you were here in a suit and a tie, and if you wanted to express yourself, you thought about wearing a blue shirt one day and not a white shirt. So, it was probably, I'm going to say 15 years ago, with the advent of companies like Google and Twitter, AT&T realized, look, we can't have that sort of stuffy corporate culture if we're going to attract the younger talent. And, every few years we seem to take a new step in, well, gosh, we're going to have to be more inclusive in how we think about the folks we're trying to attract. So, it's definitely it's a new world.
And Jim, I'm really intrigued by a comment you made a minute ago that execution is one thing to do in the remote work setting, but innovation is more difficult, which tells me that maybe some of that brainstorming, some of that innovative process does require certain level of face-to-face or informal or spontaneous idea sharing.
I think it does, Ron. And for a guy like me who's been in the workforce quite a while, I picture that happening around a conference room table or the water cooler or some sort of office environment. I have no doubt there's a 15-year-old working on some sort of virtual chat app that's going to make the idea of a conference table seem quaint. So there's new tools coming all the time. I don't think we've seen the ultimate solution yet. But yeah, it requires some sort of freewheeling give and take that maybe a technology solution or maybe a yes, for now, some portion of our work needs to be in person.
Well, I'm with you in terms of that career stage. I marvel at what the younger generation's accomplishing and their comfort level with apps and online interaction. They'll go much further than what I've seen.
Yep.
I see Kelly Gorley is on the call, and I don't want to pick on her or call her out, but I'm aware that she's the economic development director in Lincoln County, and they're doing some innovative things to try to attract remote workers. Kelly, can you unmute and tell us about that briefly?
Sure, I'm glad you called me out when you did, because I was just about to take another bite of lunch. So I put that to the side for a second. Yeah, so we have kind of really tried to latch on to this idea of, people can work anywhere anymore. And if rural opportunities, local jobs don't necessarily have a lot of the income potentials that you would have in rural or urban areas. And, opportunity for career advancement and all that kind of stuff. But there are certainly people, I think, out there in the world who can work wherever they want, and where they live right now, has kind of been dependent on having to go to an office. And if that's not the case anymore, then they can live somewhere else and still be doing what they want. And so for rural Kansas, that's money coming into the county from somewhere else that is going to be buying groceries, that's going to be maybe putting kids in school, that's going to be eating at restaurants, that's going to be buying from the pharmacy or all that kind of stuff. So we've kind of heard about a program called Make My Move, or a company called Make My Move out of Indiana, and they've been really sort of trying to help communities connect with people, remote workers who are kind of in the market for where am I going to move. And they call themselves a consumer marketing firm, so they are really trying to connect. They see communities that want people and people who want to move somewhere. And so how do they connect those two things together? And so we've contracted with them and put together a remote worker incentive package, which is trying to do two things. One is the incentive. There's a cash incentive. So if you move to Lincoln County, you've got a $5,000 relocation check, so to speak. You get half of that when you move and the other half after 1 year. So I kind of feel like in our conversation with Make My Move, and what they've been seeing from all the communities that they've been working with, is the cash is sort of the hook to get people to kind of click and say, hey, somebody's going to pay me to move somewhere. But it's really the community and what else is offered, the softer side of stuff, as opposed to the financial side, that really gets someone to kind of look around more seriously. And then also, once they move, if they have no connections to Lincoln County, it's just as easy for them to move back out as it was for them to move in. So until we really have to work at building those social connections, especially for the remote worker. They're working in their house, so they don't have those water cooler conversations with other locals to help them kind of get ingrained in the community, to understand the volunteer opportunities, where there's needs, all that kind of stuff. So they've really pushed us to say, you've got to have the cash incentive, but you have to really also focus on the social incentive piece of that. So like, for example, our package, if someone is a mountain biker, you would not think of Kansas as being a mountain biking state. But so that's something that somebody might feel like, well, I have my mountain biking group, I don't want to leave where I am to go to some place where I can't do my hobby, where I can't do my passion. So we've kind of tried to put that out front, you move here and, our local mountain biking group is going to take you out on a ride. And so they're immediately connected to other people who are like-minded in that way. Or Wilson Lake, you're a lake person. Well, you move here and we're going to get you out on the lake with some locals, so that they can kind of not only do something that they like, but are connected to people that are like-minded. I personally own a gym in town. I opened that a year ago, and I have thrown in, kind of on my own personal dime and commitment to this idea, is you get a free 1-year gym membership. Because again, I feel like you're living in an urban area, you probably have access to a YMCA or some other high quality type of gym. You think you're moving out to the sticks, and you're not going to have that anymore. And so that just kind of puts it out front. You know, if going to a gym is important to you, that is part of the deal. So that's kind of one of those things that where we've tried to make sure that not only are we putting kind of the cash hook to get somebody interested in us, but we're really trying to connect on that social level and make sure that people know that just because you're potentially moving to what feels like the boonies doesn't mean you're leaving all of society behind, you know, and culture and amenities and all that kind of stuff. You know, we have all those things here. It just might not be to the extent in an urban area, but you can still do what you love here.
Kelly,
so
my
anyway,
first
that's kind
visit,
of-
my
What's that?
first visit to the state 3 years ago was for the big bike ride down in Emporia, and that's where I realized what a beautiful state Kansas is, and really fell in love with the potential coming here. So don't underestimate the importance of bike rides in Kansas.
Yeah, and you know, Kansas, I do think there is a huge push across the state, kind of this gravel Kansas, making Kansas the gravel capital of the country, if not the world. I mean, because yeah, we might not have, you know, the bike trails that through the mountains of Colorado, but we got a lot of amazing back roads. And some of them are just as rocky as, you know, anywhere else. And so how do we kind of create that network? And Lincoln County, you know, we've been trying to kind of tag on to that too, where to try and get some routes out there. And Wilson Lake has one of the top 100 trails in the country. And, you know, most people just would not think about that Kansas, because hey, we're as flat as a pancake. So, you know, how could we have something like that? But
and at risk, Kelly, of putting you further on the spot, comments about building broadband networks, did that ring true to you in Lincoln County? Is that do you need more broadband? Is that important for attracting the sort of folks you're talking about?
oh my gosh, well, we just might have our own little conversation about that. I would say yes. I mean, that is a huge question. You know, besides, after they click on the link, the question is, what's your internet? Because if they don't have the good enough internet, I mean, that's it, conversation over. And so here in Lincoln, Lincoln itself is AT&T territory in terms of is it ILAC? Is that the proper term? Or
yep. Oh, you've done some studying.
But AT&T is not our fiber provider. And Vive Broadband came in a few years ago and did build out Lincoln with fiber. So Lincoln itself, at least we've got the fiber option, and we're pretty good. We can hold up. The western third of the county is Wilson Communications, and they have built fiber to the door out to the boonies. So you can live out in the middle of nowhere on that side of the county and be in great shape. The eastern part of the county is a little bit more of a struggle in terms of, you know, if you're going to live out in the country, that is a question where we need to know exactly where you're going to live to figure out whether you've got internet and all. And then of course there's Starlink, which I have heard good things from people. But yeah, so I feel like in a way our internet's okay. But it's not perfect where you are. I actually just yesterday, and I'll put you on the spot, Jim, but I'm sure you don't know the answer to this. I heard a rumor that AT&T is going to stop providing internet in Lincoln. And I was just kind of like, I don't think I believe that.
Well, that's a conversation that would take a long time. It may come down to a question of what technology. As you say, fiber is sort of the gold standard. It's incredibly expensive to get to everybody. You know, but as we turn back to remote working, that's really the technology that makes all these things possible. So
yeah,
it's going to take all providers at the table.
Yeah, I kind of wondered if maybe it's not so much that you guys are just not going to provide internet anymore, but maybe the DSL is going to be phased out and a more wireless type of system, or maybe you are coming in with fiber. I'm not sure, but I kind of figured I could believe that over just AT&T is just not going to have internet.
Happy to talk offline about some specifics.
Okay, yeah, I would love to, because that just came up yesterday. So
I'm glad that the issue of broadband has been raised here specifically, because it is absolutely imperative. I mean, none of this remote work, none of this work from home thing can function well or be enhanced without broadband access. So the investment that AT&T and others have made is extremely important, and it needs to continue. And certainly, as you mentioned, Jim, the policymakers have recognized that state and federal level, there is commitment, we know.
Yep. Yep. Good.
Other questions? Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any in the chat. Not seeing anyone unmute. Well, thanks, everyone. Big thank you to Jim. Jim, thank you so much for providing us the big picture from the AT&T perspective. Very, very grateful for your insights and the investment that you have made in the state and the work you're continuing to do on behalf of Kansans. Again, I'll mention the remote online initiative, the classes that are available now, monthly online classes, 9 modules, interactive workshops each week, but modules that can be completed at your own pace week by week. And that curriculum is entirely online and available to Kansas citizens, both for the remote work professional and the remote work team leader. Please, again, mark your calendars for those future dates. Our next Remote Work Wednesday will be on December 6, 2023, again at noon Central Time. Our tentative speaker is one of the leaders of the Smart Rural Communities Project, which is a project of rural telecom companies across the state of Kansas. So please join us. There's a link in the chat. And you can follow up and be a part of the next Remote Work Wednesday. Big thanks to Jim Jamison, and thanks to all of you for taking part in Remote Work Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks, everyone.